All right, well, good morning, everybody. And today we're going to be taking a look at test surveys and pools and how to use pools for creating tests and how to create surveys. And the big question a lot of people have is how do they upload questions to create test questions and surveys, etc. So we're going to be going over a lot of those things. So I'm in my Blackboard course. I'm going to go on down to my control panel and I'm going to go to my course tools. I'm going to open test surveys and pools. We're just going to talk about uploading questions to a test first. I'm going to go to my tests area and I'm going to build a new test. And this part is pretty much the same every time, whether we're uploading questions or not. We need to give a name for our new test. This is going to be our great new test. And then, of course, we want to give a description and instructions for our students to follow. This covers Chapter 5. And the instructions, answer each question. Of course, you have the full use of the text editor here in both boxes, so you can include images and videos and links to things. And once you finish entering your items, just go ahead, submit. Now we have we get to the part where we want to create questions. Now we can go about creating questions the normal route using the create questions button and selecting each question type and entering them. Or we can use this button to the far right that says upload questions. And before I click that, actually I'll click it and we'll jump into the upload questions area. You can see here it wants me to browse for a file to upload. So the big question is, how do we create that file? What does it look like? Now, a big help here is, and this is true pretty much in any area you're in Blackboard, if you're not aware of this, most areas will have this more help link. It usually appears underneath by the description of the area that you're in. In this particular case, when we click this, it'll give us instructions on how to create a file to upload our questions into our test. It's a pretty lengthy help. Usually they're not this long, but this particular topic is a little longer than most. So I'm going to show you what creating one of these files looks like. I'm going to open up a file I've already got created. Now, when you upload questions to your test, you want to upload them in a tab delimited text file format. If that sounds a little complex, it's not too bad. And I'll talk about what that means. I'm going to start by creating my questions in a spreadsheet program. Microsoft Excel is a great one, but if you use Google Docs, you can use that absolutely. Or if you use OpenOffice, you can use the spreadsheet program from that, etc. So here I've got a file. I'm going to maximize this and I'm going to open up these columns a little bit so everybody can see everything in them. We're going to format, we're going to auto fit those column widths. Great. Okay, so you can see that not every column has information in it. Why is that? Well, let's talk about that. The first column that I have in my spreadsheet here tells me what kind of question I'm going to create for this particular row. So in fact, let me increase the font size here so everybody can see really well. I'm going to jump that up to 20. There we go. Make that a little bigger. There we go. So in my first cell here, I have the abbreviation ESS. That stands for essay, and that's the kind of question that this row is going to contain. And how did I know to use that abbreviation? Well, I went to that more help link, and one of the, oh, there we go, one of the things it tells you in this little pop-up is what abbreviations stand for what types of questions. When I scroll down here, when I get to my file format examples area, the first one is essay, and it tells me that I want to use ESS as my abbreviation. I'm like, okay, great. So that's what I did in my spreadsheet. I put that ESS in that first cell. And then if I jump back to Blackboard here, this help file also tells me that then I need a tab, and then I want my question text. Now, while I'm creating this in Excel, I'm going to just, every time it tells me to tab, I'm going to just move to a new cell. If I go to the next cell, here's my question text. Discuss your thoughts on the future of oil as a resource. Okay, so I've created my question text. Now what do I do? And in this little file, it says, okay, I can tab over and then put a sample answer in the next cell if I wanted to. The sample answer is optional for this question type. I chose not to input a sample answer, so the next cell is empty. That's all I need to do for an essay. So I've got a few different question types in here. The next type is FIB. And if I go to that help again, I can see that FIB is a fill in the blank. Here it tells me that FIB means fill in the blank. And again, it tells me now I want to tab and create question text. And then I want to tab and enter an answer. And then I can tab and enter an answer again. And then it tells me that answer text can be repeated for each correct answer that is part of the question. And I can have up to 100 answers. So my next question is a fill in the blank. Name one of the Beatles is the question text. And then I entered 4 answers. I could enter more if I wanted to, and I could keep going. And then we have an MAT, which is a matching question, and my text for the question. And then now when you're creating a matching question, here's our description of matching. Now it tells me that when I tab, I want to create my question text, which I did, and then I tab again, and then I want my answer text, and then the matching text. So the two things that match together go next to each other in different cells, and then I can keep entering more answers in that fashion. And then, so here I did that in my row 3. I have an MAT, so matching my question text, and then I have my 2 matching answers next to each other. So Maine and Augusta, New Hampshire and Concord, Vermont, Montpelier. And then, so this, the next question in the next row is a multiple choice. That's probably one of the easier ones to create. When you create that, you enter your type, your question text, and then you enter your answers, and followed by each answer, you want to mark it whether it's correct or incorrect. And then lastly, I have a true false question, my question text, and then whether it's true or false. So you see the format of each type of question is different. And as long as you follow the guide in that help section, you should be okay. Now, once you have everything sorted out in your Excel file or in your Google spreadsheet or Open Office spreadsheet, then you need to create a text file from it. And you want to create a text file that is tab delimited. And what that means is when you create it, it's going to read each of these cells as a tab, as if you hit the tab key, much like when you're using a word processing program and you hit tab, it jumps forward 5 spaces. It's going to read each of those tab entries. And that is how the upload will know that, you know, it's done reading a particular piece of the puzzle, if you will. And when it sees that tab, it says, okay, I've got all the question text. Now I'm going to go on to the answers and so on. So let me back up here a little bit. So I've got my spreadsheet. I'm going to save this again. I'm going to go File, and I'm going to do a Save As. What this will allow me to do, instead of saving it as an Excel workbook, I'm going to click my Save As type, and I'm going to find text file. But I want to make sure it says text tab delimited. And if I find that, I can select that. And then when I save it, it's going to save it as a new file format. If you're using Microsoft Excel, it tends to ask you this particular question. You can just say yes if you want to keep the formatting. And it's created a second file. If I pull up my Windows Explorer here, here's my original file, this uploaded questions text. And here's the new one, it's a .txt. If I open that up, it'll open it up in Notepad, and you can see it's just text with tabs between each of the text. Could I have done this directly in Notepad or some other text editing program? I absolutely could have. Using the spreadsheet program makes it a lot easier for me to keep everything straight and read it in a more legible format. So once I'm finished with my spreadsheet program, I can close it out. And I'm going to come back to my upload questions. I've created my file, and I'm now going to browse and grab it. Oops, there, it's up here. There it is, my upload questions text. All right, open, and you can see that it's added in here. Now you do have a points per question field here. And so you could set how many points you want each question to be worth. And I'll point out that this isn't set in stone. Once you enter the points per question, you can, once the file's been uploaded and the questions have all been created, you can go in and edit the point values for the different questions if you need to change them. Sometimes you're not going to use the same point value per question. Also, when you're creating your questions, if you noticed, it doesn't offer you any place to enter feedback text. So if you want to use feedback text, you can add that after the questions have been uploaded. I'm going to leave my points per question set to 10, and then I'll come on over to my submit button, select that, and now it's uploading my file. And I get a green bar at the top of my screen that says question upload successful. And you can see now I have questions in my test. You know, here's my essay question, and then my fill in the blank question, and then my matching. And now the matching questions are interesting. You can see that the first column isn't exactly in the order I created them in, but that's okay. When the students see this, that'll give them sort of a randomized version, then they can match everything up. Then my multiple choice, you can see that the first answer is marked as the correct one, and the others are not checked off with the green mark, so those are the incorrect answers. And my true false, we know that it's false, which is exactly how I set it up in my Excel file. And again, once you finish uploading, you can then do things such as go and edit the point values for your questions and enter a new value and submit it. Likewise, you can say we go to our essay here. You can edit the different settings of the question after the fact. So once it's uploaded, the upload doesn't set it in stone. You can then go and tweak it a bit more. You can add rubrics after the fact, and you can put notes in and feedback if there's some feedback available. Those are the basics for just uploading your questions. Now this format and instruction set, getting these questions up in there, this can be applied to creating your tests. It can also be applied to creating a survey and to create a question pool. So it's a very useful skill to know. And again, this more help link, depending on where you are, will give you some useful advice. And when you do the upload questions, it will give you the breakdown of how to create your questions in a format that the program can read. So I keep mentioning pools. I'm going to jump to pools. Unless there's any immediate questions about uploading questions to a test.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I didn't have a question about uploading, but I was curious about the matching. So, and I know you probably have mentioned this before, but like capitalization. So would you need to provide alternatives if somebody, let's say, didn't capitalize, let's say Connecticut, so you'd have to provide that?
So the matching questions use the input answers that you put in. The ones that would matter would be the fill in the blanks, and you can set case sensitivity on those. So right here next to each question, each answer that you end, you can just say pattern match, or you could even say contains. So if if the answer might be a little variable, you could just say contains. So as long as I get a certain keyword or set of keywords, then it would still mark it as correct. And then pattern would read it, so case might not matter. There's also case sensitivity that you can turn on and off. I think by default it'll read anything, whether it's capitalized or not, as the correct answer. But if you toggle case sensitivity on, then case matters. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we're going to jump into pools and take a look at those. Now, a question pool is essentially a resource of questions that can be used to create tests. It's a bank, if you will. I'm going to show you building a pool. I'm actually going to show you real quick an actual pool that I've already got created. If I open it up by editing it, we can see that it has a series of questions already inside it. And on the left-hand side, we've got this browse criteria. And what that does is it lets you look through different types of questions you might have created throughout your course. If you have other pools or other tests, you can actually look through the questions in those different places. You can look for them by question type, whether they're what categories they belong to and levels of difficulty. And these things, these categories and levels of difficulty, are things you set when you create a question. There's an area called categories when you create a question, where you can set these values, and those values are just there for you to reference your questions later on. And this is where all of that comes into play. It helps you sort through your questions to create a pool, or even to create a new test. So we've kind of got a view of what a pool looks like. Now let's go and create one. So when I go to pools, from test surveys and pools, I'm going to build one. And it starts out pretty much like we'd expect. We want a name, a description, instructions. I'm just going to give it a name for right now. I could give it a description. I'm just going to say combination of all my questions. I'm going to skip instructions for the moment, and I'll submit. Now we're creating the pool. We've got a name for it. Now we need to add questions. So we can do this different ways. We can create questions just like we were creating a test. We can just go select a question type, create the question right in the interface, and it'll be added to the pool. We can also click this Find Questions button. And what this does is brings up a browsing window that'll allow us to look through things we've already created in our course. So I can look through my tests, all the different tests I have. I can select a particular test and see all the questions from that test, and I can select a particular question that I want to add. Each question has this little alternate window button. When you click that, it'll open up the question so you can read it in a separate window to get an idea of what it is. So I could select an individual question. I could select all the questions from a particular test by clicking this checkbox at the top. It selects them all. When I select my questions, I hit the submit button, and it would add them to my pool. So if I go back to the left-hand side here under tests, I can actually click this button that says all tests. It'll show me every question from every test that I have created. And again, if I wanted to select them all, if I want to add them all into my pool, I could check the checkbox at the top and select them all. Much like I showed you earlier, we can also browse by types of questions. So if I only want to see my essay questions, I can do that. Here's my essay questions, or I could, search by fill in the blanks, etc. Likewise, we can search by categories, topics, level of difficulty, and keywords, which are all things you set when you create questions in your tests. I don't know if I've got any keywords set. No, I do have one level of difficulty and no topics, but I do have a couple of categories. So the more you add these category types and topics and keywords and things when you create your questions for your test, it takes a little extra time to fill those areas out, but when you do later on, it helps you out tremendously, so you can get through and find all your questions quickly and sort through them. So I'm creating a pool. I want to create a collection of questions. Maybe I don't really care what types they are or anything like that. Maybe I'm just going to create a pool of every question I've ever created. So I'm going to say all tests, and I'm going to check this box at the top, and everything gets selected. And I'm going to submit that. And it might take a minute. There we go. Now my pool is now populated with all the questions I've just added. And I can search through these again, by looking at the different types and the different categories, etc. you do get a little breakdown. You get the description of the pool, instructions. I didn't add any, so there isn't any to display. But how many questions total? The total point value of them all. And you can see they each display their point values on the far right side in the point column. You can change those if you need to. Likewise, you can edit the individual questions. Keep in mind, if you edit these questions from the pool's interface, it'll change the question for any other place that question appears. So if these are coming from other tests you've created and you edit them, that change will ripple out through those different tests. You can also add questions to your pool by uploading them. If you click the Upload Questions button, this interface is exactly the same as what we just used when we uploaded questions to an individual test. We browse for our file, we add it, we give the questions a point value, and we submit it. The file is exactly the same kind of format. If I click the More Help, we'll see we get the same pop-up that tells me how to create my question types in a tab delimited text file. So you've got some options when you're creating your pool. You can pull them from other things you've already created. You could create them right on the spot, and you can upload them using a file. So let's say I have this pool created. Now, how do I go about using it? Great question. I'm going to go to my course content. And I'm going to create a new test. I'm going to go to assessments and say test. And I'm going to create a new one. And we'll give this new test using pools. I'd enter description and some instructions for my students, and I'd submit. And now I need to, this test doesn't have any questions added to it, so I need to add some. So if I go to my reuse question drop down here, I can create a question set, or I can create a random block, or I can find questions. Let's start with create random block. This is a great feature. When I click this, it'll show me my list of pools that I have created. So I can say, well, I want to use all the questions from my pool, or my basic pool. Or I could say, I want to use all the questions from my pool's example. Or I could say, use questions from both. And then you can then select what types of questions you want to use from that pool. I could say all the pool questions, in which case it shows everything. Or I could say particular question types. So essays and fill in the blanks, etc. I'm going to use all pool questions. So I'm using my basic pool and all pool questions. And I submit that. And now I have this random block stat area. It tells me success. I've saved a random block. And now I need to say how many questions I want to display and their point value. So when you're using a random block, it lets you pull the questions from a pool, but you don't need to use the entire set of questions from that pool. You can say, okay, only use 10 of the questions from the pool. And so it'll randomly pick 10 questions to ask a student from that pool of questions. So if I now click on the preview questions that match, and these are the 10, these are the questions that it can pull from. It's going to pull 10 of them every time somebody takes the test. I can also I can also add more questions to this list in the same way by creating more questions, or I could upload more questions. But right now it's pulling from, it's got this random block. You can see that next to where it says random block, it says 1-10. That means questions 1 through 10 will come from this random block. So I could use a random block for my first, say, 10 questions. If you create a pool of true and false questions, and you always include a set of 10 true and false on all your tests, you create a big pool of true and falses, and then use random block to say, use the first 10 are going to come from this pool. They're all going to be, you know, my true and falses. And then you could add more questions after that that aren't random, that are very specific, just by using the normal methods. So pools can be very cool as far as that goes. Likewise, if you're just creating a normal test, maybe you don't want to use random block. You can just say find questions. And again, it'll show you your list of pools. But this time, we're not creating a random set of questions. We're saying we want these specific questions. So if I look at my, my basic pool here, I can just say, all right, I want this one and I want that one. Or I could select them all, etc. And then again, I can browse through them by categories. And once I select them, I just submit, and it'll add them to the list of questions in the test. So I see my random block set here, questions 1 through 10. Here are the 2 questions I just selected, and I can see that question number 11 is the true false I just selected, and number 12 is the fill in the blank I just selected. So the first 10 will be randomly pulled from a pool. The other 2 are very specific questions. So pool is a great way for sort of setting yourself up ahead of time and having a collection to pull from when you're creating tests. Any quick questions about pools so far?
I have a question, Rob. When you
Yeah.
go to reuse question dropdown,
Mm-hmm.
what's the difference between the random block and the create question set?
Great question.
We'll figure that out.
So I haven't used question set a whole lot, but if I recall correctly, you can select a series of questions that it's very similar to a random block, but you can be a little more specific with it. I guess that's the best way to instead of saying this gigantic block of questions, use this. It's sort of narrowing it down to a much more specific set of questions. I can dig up a little more information on it too, Robin, and email you offline with a better answer for you. It's one setting that I am a little weak on.
I think the random block usually gets us what we need, but I just didn't know if there was something.
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, question set. So I do know that when you create a question set, that set can be pulled from later on, much like a pool. But if if you create a set and say these questions are part of this set, then later on when you're creating other tests, you can say I want to use this question set that I created before. So it pulls those very specific questions without me having to select each individual question again. So sort of creating a subset of questions. It loses the random factor of the pool, but it creates a sort of essentially a file folder of questions that you can draw from all the time and just say, I know I'm going to get these specific questions every time you use this set. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. And the last thing I want to jump into go back to test surveys and pools, and we're going to talk about surveys. Surveys are, their setup seems it will be seem very familiar. It'll be very much like creating a test. When you create a survey, a column in the grade center gets created, but only to mark off whether someone's filled out the survey or not. The surveys do not get graded, and the answers are, you can't look at an individual's responses to a survey. The surveys are always anonymous. So when you look at a survey's responses, you will only see the answers you've received, but not who submitted them. And when you look at, and you can't look at an individual response, you have to look at as a collection of responses. So let's look at a survey real quick here. I've got this one called How Am I Doing? If I edit it, we will look at its details. I can see there's a total of 3 questions, and one student has already submitted some responses. I have a description. This is your chance to rate me as an instructor. The instructions are answer each question truthfully. And then we go down, and I have some Likert scale questions set up, as well as one short answer question. Great way for creating a scale 1 to 5. It always usually includes a not applicable, and I'll show you how to create those in a minute. So this is the basics. It looks very much like I'm looking at a test because it's very much this. It's the same tool set that does this. So let's real quick look at a student's view of this. I'm going to log out of my faculty account real quick and jump into a student account. And I can see that my instructor has posted a link to the survey. I'm going to click on it. And it starts out just like I'm taking a test. I get my description and my instructions. I can see that I have to, that I can start the survey and resume it later if I wanted. I'm going to click begin, and I jump right into the survey. It's being presented to me all at once. This whole screen format area is very similar to taking a test. So I'm going to go ahead and answer my questions. And save and submit my answers. And I get a pop-up saying, do I want to actually submit my answers? I'm saying yes. So from the student view, it's very much like taking a test, and I even get a sort of a review of how long it took me to take it, when I submitted my answers, etc., just like I was taking a test. I just click this OK button, and it brings me back and it shows me the results I had submitted. Can students see the results of a survey? Yes, there is a way to set that for the whole class. So I'm going to jump out of this and jump back into my faculty account, and we'll create a survey. So again, I go to my course tools, and I go to test surveys and pools and surveys. So we're going to build a survey. I could import a survey. Now this imports a survey that has been created already in Blackboard that I have exported. So when you see your list of surveys, for this one I already have created, I could click this drop down, and I have an export option, and it'll create a little package, a zip file that you can download to your computer, and then you can use that and upload it into other courses that you might be instructing. And that's what the import would let you do. So if you have like a standard survey you use in all your courses, you can export it as a zip file and then load it into your individual courses as needed. We're going to build a survey, and I'm going to kind of breeze through some of this, as you know, some of these areas are very familiar to us. This is a brand new survey. And then I could enter a description and some instructions to the students, and I submit my settings, and then I can create questions. And again, just like a test, I could create them using the create questions dropdown. I can find questions. I could create a pool of survey questions and draw from that. I could upload questions using the same file format, using a text, tab delimited text file. I'm just going to create some questions. Now, your question list here is a little different than your test question list. One of the great ones it adds is opinion scale / Likert. So Likert scale questions, always a great resource to use for quick answers. I'm just going to make a one question survey. And my question title is, so again, like if you were creating a question for your test, the question title and the question text do not need to both be filled in. You just need the question text. Is this a great class? The question title is really your reference. You can add one if you want. I like to do it, but not everybody likes to. It adds a little more clutter when you view your questions. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the same as your question text, but you want it to reference your question and you want it to be short and simple. Something like this. So my question is, this is a great class. And I'm gonna leave my default numbering. I will leave it my orientation set to the default horizontal. You could show the answers in a random order. Since this is a Likert scale, that doesn't really make any sense, so I'm gonna leave it. By default, you get 6 answers for the Likert, and it's all pre-filled in with the strongly agree, etc. You can change all of that if you wish. You can remove some of the scale. The 6th answer is always going to be not applicable. I'm going to use all the default settings. And again, like I was talking about earlier, your categories and keywords, I could set some of this. That way later, if I need to search for more questions or for more surveys or create a pool, I could find it easier by using these references. And I could add any more notes I want. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And so I have one question in my survey right now, but my survey is pretty much ready to go. I could deploy this. And deploying a survey is just like deploying a test. So I'm going to go back to my course content area. And I'm going to go to assessments. And instead of going to test, I'm going to go to survey. And I see my survey I've created, brand new survey. I'm going to select it and I'm going to submit it. Now, you can create a survey directly from this area. I wouldn't recommend it because sometimes you get interrupted while you're creating, and it can, and if you get interrupted, you might lose a lot of things you've set up, and so it's easier to create the survey first and then deploy it this way. But it's just like deploying a test that you've created. And again, it'll show us the name. We can add a description for the link to the survey. Do we want the survey to appear in a new window or not? I usually say no, but you can say yes, and it'll open up a new window and finish the survey in. Do we want it to be immediately available? I'm going to say yes. I can add an announcement, and this will create an announcement with a link to the survey. It'll also email my students. Do we want to allow multiple attempts for the survey? You can set this. You can allow an unlimited number of attempts, or you could limit how many times they can take the survey. It's very much like the multiple attempt setting in a question. Sorry, in a test. I am not going to allow multiple attempts. I want the survey responses to be one shot and done. Do we want to force completion? Do we want them to take to finish the survey once they begin? I am actually going to say yes, I want that to happen. If you leave this unchecked, the student can start their survey and then save their responses and leave and close the window, come back 2 hours later, open it back up, and then continue taking it. Do we want to set a timer? I'm not going to set a timer for the survey, but you can do that very much like a test. You can set the timer, say how many minutes you want it to be for, and then do you want the survey to auto submit itself once the timer has run out? And then you can limit the display of the survey. How long do we want it to be available for? You can, and this is an option we find on most of our things we create in Blackboard. We can set a date and time that we want to display the item after, or until, or both. And then you can set a password for the survey. This is like creating a password for a test. You check off the box, you enter your password. If you do create a password for the survey, you need some way to get that password out to your students, whether it's via email or an announcement or what have you. If they click on the survey to take it, they'll be prompted to enter that password, and without it, they can't take it. Availability exceptions, you can add individual users or even a group of users to this list. It'll let them ignore settings like the timer or availability, and there you occasionally will have a student who has some sort of need that they have where using those items is detrimental to them. So adding that, you can add them to the exception list, and they will ignore those things, and they can take the survey without worrying about timing or anything like that. And lastly, a due date. Do we want to have a due date? When you set a due date for a survey, the student can complete the survey post due date. The due date will mark it as late if the student passes that date and time before they take the survey, but it doesn't impede them from taking it, unless you check these other option to say not allow them to take it after the due date is passed. Then how do we want to show the results? You can show, so the status shows the students whether they've completed the survey or not, how many people have completed it, and then you can also show all the submitted answers to the student when they review the survey. And then how do you want them to take it? Do you want them to answer all the questions on one page, or do you want to present the questions one at a time? If you do set the one at a time option, you can check off this box to prohibit backtracking. So if you're presenting the questions one at a time, but you don't want them to go back and change their answer to something they've already answered, you'll want to use this option. I'm going to present everything one at a time. And lastly, of course, do you want to randomize your questions? A great way for, making sure the students aren't able to, find patterns and things in your questions when you lay them out. I'm just going to leave that off since I only have one question in my survey, and I'll submit my settings. Of course, it adds it to the bottom. So scroll down here. Here's my survey I just created, brand new survey. And again, I like to point out that every type of item you create in Blackboard has a different icon associated with it. Assignments have this ruler and pencil, and links will have a little world, a globe with a piece of paper. Surveys look like a clipboard. And then when you click on it, it brings you to the survey. It's been deployed. So survey, very much like creating a test and setting it up and deploying it. But the responses, if we go to our grade center, oh, there we go, full grade center. When we go to our grade center and we look at a survey that has answers, I see that a student has completed the survey, but I can't read their individual responses. When I look at the responses, it'll show me all responses submitted by all students. If I go and look at my attempts statistics, I can see how many the percentage of answers, in total for my students who have attempted this. So 100% agree that, my course material is very useful. Always a good idea to look to see how many attempts there have been. So you know that 100% of 2 people, but the more people who answer the survey, this number will go up. And of course your numbers here will change more dramatically. And then here's my short answer area. And then I can see I've got 2 answers given so far. Everything is great, and you do not make enough time for students. So Robin's asked if I could go over how to check if a test or survey I made is deployed. Yep, I can do that for sure. So any quick questions about surveys? They're pretty straightforward, very much like a test. So Robin, you want to know, how do I check to see if a test has been deployed or not? If I go to my tests, surveys, and polls area, say I go to my tests, and I look at all the tests I've created, the middle column is the deployed column, and it'll tell me whether it's been deployed or not. And if I have deployed it, it'll tell me where in my course, what section I've deployed it in. So you see I have some tests that have been deployed to my course content area, and then I have a bunch of tests that haven't been deployed at all. And the same is true for if you look at your surveys. And you can see if it's been deployed or not. Both these surveys have been deployed to my course content. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me this morning. We try to do these webinars every Monday at 10 and every Wednesday at 2. If you have any technical questions or that you need answered, you can always feel free to email me at rhawk@nec.edu. I also have an hour drop-in office time Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. On Zoom, and Thursdays at 10 a.m. And if you have any requests for help with best practices or how to design your course better, always reach out to our instructional designers. They're always glad to help. So thank you, and we'll see you again.